just looking back, recapping today, and just looking ahead to tomorrow as well, it's important to note that yes, we've had some potentially interesting news come out in the last couple of days. But one of the things I said in my opening remarks this morning, which I'd just like to reiterate again for everyone this evening, is that the occasion today and tomorrow, and of course yesterday with the planners, I'm extremely proud, not just of my company's role in the industry, but also the industry as a whole and how we've gone about the last 12 months in developing the UK solar sector. You know, and we need to reflect, as I said this morning, on the successes that we've had, on the tremendous growth that we've seen. I mean, we heard Finlay talking this morning about 2 to 4.5 gigawatts now over the last year and a half, and talking about doubling the market globally to 2018 from a 50 gigawatt cumulative market to a 100 gigawatt market per annum. And the UK is going to be a big part of that. So there's going to be this huge underlying demand for solar energy going forward. I mean, Jonathan Porritt this morning, I wrote down what he said. He said it's the single most important challenge humankind has faced. That's what we're talking about here, the underlying need for what we're doing, the people in this room, what you've done in the last year, and what you're continuing to do over the next 12 months and far into the future is something that's not going away. It's not going to change because an election takes place. It's not going to change because there's yet another review thrown up as a minor obstacle in space of maybe it may affect a few projects, it may delay some things, but ultimately it doesn't change the business case, which is that we need secure, clean, reliable, cost-effective energy on the grid. We need it now. We've seen that. We heard from a number of speakers this morning about grid capacity issues. Nick was talking about, Nick Boyle this morning, talks about the fact that just in 2011, the grid capacity was 13% they had as a leeway. It's down to 2% currently, yet they've still got to take more and more coal plants off the grid. So we need this power. We need it right now. In the second session, we started talking about the impact on the environment. I think that's really important. I was particularly pleased to see Natural England join us on the programme this year. When we started out in 2004, 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, I remember again with Stephen actually down in Cornwall, there was a very interesting debate which took place with the Prince of Wales on food versus fuel, and there were loads of NGO stakeholders there. One of them was Natural England at the time. It was a local rep, not Simon. And I remember having that conversation with him where he talked about it being such a blight and how it looked terrible, and how could you and this was just on rooftops. Not even in fields at that point. That's all we were talking about. And to see the change of attitude in groups like Natural England, the CPRE, who are now engaging with Jonathan Scurlock and nephew a great deal more, to see them change their attitudes towards solar, I think is again a fantastic testament to the people in this room and their teams throughout the last 3 or 4 years. And we need to celebrate that and celebrate those successes and communicate it, of course. We heard from Jonathan Scurlock, of course, from the NFU, certainly a new stat for me, and he always gives me a new stat that I like to take with me for the rest of the year. I'll keep this one with me. 50% of that 4.2 or 4.5 gigawatts cumulative, depending on who you believe, is on agricultural farmland. Okay, that's a great stat. But what was important was the farmers want it there. They want it there because it helps them with their farms, it helps them be more sustainable in their own businesses, it helps with their crops potentially. We've seen the uses solar can have, not just from biodiversity and wildflowers. We heard all about that. We heard about the BRE, the NSC, the STA, the new guidance for biodiversity that's out there, the 10 Commandments. I mean, I did see Ray hold it up like this. It was a bit like a tablet, Sermon on the Mount type activity later on. But you know, we need to celebrate these successes because we've engaged very actively with all these stakeholder groups who represent genuine community interest all the way through. I just want to draw everyone's attention to all the positives that we've had as an industry in the last year that we've heard about today. The other stat I took away from Jonathan's presentation was that, and of course quote him often, solar is 30% more efficient, 30 times more efficient in its land use than some other renewables. I think it was bioenergy was the one he used, and he had a sliding scale there. That's really, really important because I don't think many people understand that in terms of land use for energy that comes out of that land, solar is right up there as one of the leanest technologies in that sense from a footprint perspective. So when we talk about landscape, that's absolutely vital. I then learned from James Lloyd when we talked from national trust. What I really took away from what he was saying was that solar is revolutionary, it's not evolutionary. And I think this is fantastic, because when you see those pictures of those grade 1 listed castles where they've put the solar next to the greenhouse, not on the back behind a hill, because they believe it has an aesthetic appeal. His point about preservation versus conservation is absolutely critical. Conservation, we look at windmills in Holland, and this is one of their biggest tourist draw cards. Windmills were industrialisation of the countryside hundreds of years ago, and we're seeing the same transition happen now. Modern life has gone on, and we as a society have to adapt in how we generate our energy if we're going to sustain the way we live. So seeing wind turbines, I know we're at a solar conference, but I love the look of wind turbines, I really do. I love seeing solar there. When you're coming up on the train or you're driving through the countryside and you see these installations, for me it's a testament that we are doing something to safeguard our future and our children's future in this country. And that's really, really important. And it's so encouraging to hear stakeholders from these NGOs, whether it's the NFU, Natural England, the National Trust, who again, I'll say it again, represent the community interest, saying these things with us now. And to me, it's revolutionary. And finally, I've talked about Ray's Sermon on the Mount a moment already, but I was really interested to hear about what's happening with energy storage. Everyone I speak to says, oh yeah, it's coming. But you saw from Ray, he's talking 50% reductions from that Tesla plant in 3 years. We're talking about really disruptive technology. We heard from Duncan about 5 sites they're already using large-scale energy storage to help mitigate issues with the grid. And again, to me, that's new information. Everyone's talking about energy storage, but there are people out there doing it. And so again, we need to embrace this and make sure that whether they're policymakers, DNOs, whoever the people are that are putting up the barriers for your projects are aware of this information. And finally, we looked at post-subsidy solar. When are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? Okay, no one was going to put their name up and say it's going to happen on X date. But it was really interesting to look at the rigorous data sets from Bloomberg New Energy Finance and to see that we're actually on a path that's not dissimilar from many other more mature solar markets in the world. In particular, the PPA market that's going along in the US. And when you combine that with a lot of the disruptive financial models that are coming into place now, the business case for solar is changing, it's dynamic, it's exciting, and we have a lot of opportunity here to deploy it well into the future. And finally, of course, we heard from Stephen, a bit of another call to arms. We had a call to arms in the morning from Nick, push back at government, don't let them do this to us, work together. Well, here's another one, work together with communities, bring the public along for the ride, and they will reward us. Okay, they will reward us by allowing those planning permissions to go through. They will reward us by influencing their politicians in their local electorates to say, hey guys, we are in support of renewables. Because as Ray showed you, DEC's own poll, 82% are in favour of solar, only 5% against. So once again, there's obviously a disconnect between the local parliamentary officials and this national polling that's going on. And it's our job, we've all got businesses, we've got businesses in different constituencies. It's our job, each and every one of us, to make sure our local member understands that you're employing X number of people in your constituency and their livelihoods depend on a clean energy future. And finally, of course, I think a really important point, and we just saw the Royal Mail got sold off, months, in the last couple of months. God, it's a tongue twister at the end of the day, I tell you, the remunicipalisation of energy. This is what we talk about. When we talk about Germany's success with renewables, a lot of that came about because of a lot of community-owned schemes, a lot of grassroots lobbying, which led up into the national government to the point where there was such a groundswell of public opinion. Didn't matter what party ended up getting elected, they had to show support for these renewables. So it's really important, I think, that if we can get behind, schemes, whether it's what Stephen's proposing in coming together a bit more and creating some kind of vehicle to actively promote community energy vehicles around the country, or whether we're individually during our public consultations, all the developers out there, certainly the ones in this room are out there doing their public consultations for each of their sites, using that as a way to educate and inform and help the public understand. Again, I say, let's bring them along for the ride.